All right, let's dive deep into a really fascinating story. It's a place where modern, cutting-edge oceanography seems to collide with a text that's 1,400 years old, describing the exact same hidden phenomenon. It's a real mystery.
So let me just start by asking you this. We all know what waves look like, right? The ones crashing on the beach, the ones you see from a boat. But what if I told you the true giants, the real monster waves on our planet, are moving in total darkness, completely hidden from sight?
Well, believe it or not, they're real. Deep, deep beneath the surface, there are massive walls of water, sometimes hundreds of feet high, traveling silently through the ocean itself. They are physically there, but you would never, ever see them from the surface. Today, we're going to explore what they are and how they might have been described long, long before we had the science to even know they existed. So you're probably wondering, how is that even possible? How can you have a wave inside the ocean? Well, to get that, you first have to understand that the ocean isn't just one big, uniform tub of water. It's much more complex. The secret ingredient here is something called the pycnocline. Now, that sounds like a super complicated science term, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. It's just a boundary layer where the density of the water changes, and changes fast. The best way to picture it is like trying to mix oil and water. You've got the warmer, sunlit water up at the surface, which is less dense, and it's basically floating on top of this much colder, saltier, and way denser water in the deep ocean. The pycnocline? That's the invisible line, the barrier, where those two very different layers of water meet. And this boundary, this pycnocline, it acts like its own surface deep within the sea. And just like wind creates waves on the ocean's real surface, things like tides and currents create these enormous waves along this internal boundary. We call them internal waves. And look, these aren't just little ripples we're talking about. These internal waves can be hundreds of feet tall, absolutely dwarfing any wave you'd see on the surface. They travel for huge distances, totally unseen, all happening down in the pitch-black abyss where zero sunlight can reach. It's a fundamental part of how our oceans work, and it's completely hidden. Okay, so that's the modern science, right? Stuff we figured out with submarines and sonar. But now, let's hit the rewind button. Let's look at a description of the deep ocean from a completely different place. A verse from the Quran. Yeah, you heard that right. We're going back 1,400 years. This is a time long before any technology existed to even dream about what was happening thousands of feet below the surface. And yet, listen to this description from the Quran's Surah An-Nur. Darknesses within an unfathomable sea which is covered by waves, upon which are waves, over which are clouds, darknesses, some of them upon others. Just listen to the specific layering in that language. It's not describing a chaotic mess, it's suggesting a structured system, one layer on top of another. And that brings us to the crucial point. What exactly are we reading here? Is this just beautiful, powerful poetry describing a really bad storm? Or is it something else? Could it be an uncannily accurate physical description of the ocean's real structure? Let's look at both sides. A skeptic would say, look, waves upon waves is just a figure of speech for a really violent sea. And that's fair. But the counterargument points to a key detail. The text specifically connects the lower waves to darknesses. Think about it. Surface storms happen where there's light, but the deep ocean, that's a place of absolute pitch-black darkness. And if you dig into the original text, there's a specific preposition used, fokihi, which translates to above which. This isn't just a jumble. It's describing a stack, a deep layer, then waves, with more waves above which are clouds. That strongly implies a distinct vertical structure. And you have to remember the context here. A sailor in the 7th century knew one thing and one thing only, surface waves. The idea that there was another, even bigger set of waves moving completely hidden beneath them in the dark, that was totally outside the realm of human knowledge at the time. And this is where it really clicks into place. Let's just map it out side by side. The text describes clouds over waves. Well, that perfectly matches clouds over surface waves. But then it says those waves are on top of another layer of waves, down in total darkness. And that corresponds perfectly to our surface waves riding on top of the massive internal waves at the pycnocline, deep in the pitch-black abyss. The parallel is just striking. So when you put the ancient text and modern oceanography right next to each other, the similarities are, Well, they're hard to ignore. It really pushes you to look at this old description from a much, much deeper perspective. Which, of course, brings us to the final question we have to ask. Is this incredibly specific, layered description that aligns so perfectly with a scientific reality we only discovered 1,400 years later, is that just a remarkable, poetic coincidence? Or could it be pointing to something more? You know, the argument basically boils down to this. A human observer back then, a sailor, could only ever describe the surface. This text, however, seems to be describing the whole system, from the clouds all the way down into the hidden depths, almost as if it's seeing it all from a divine perspective. So the next time you look out at the ocean, just remember those vast, unseen waves moving silently below. And maybe consider that the phrase, waves upon waves, was never just poetry, but a startlingly accurate, ancient description of the physics of the pycnocline.